So what we're going to start with, what is Xcode? So over here on the left, I've got a copy of Xcode running, and I already have a new project. So the project is called TTM, Teacher Time Manager. And the problem that we're solving is the fact that teachers generally don't have a way of managing how long each task is going to take. And this will be a visual representation of that time on how long to go in a task, along with a list of activities underneath it. So on the right hand side, I've got my keynote presentation. We're going to be using that to kind of guide us through the design process and the design of our app, which will also in turn help us decide how to best code the application. So in regards to Xcode, on the left hand side of the application window, Xcode's window, I've got the project navigator. So this is essentially where all the files are at. A lot of people get confused in the way that Xcode is put together, or Xcode application is put together. So normally when you start a new project, you end up with a project file, a blue file inside your folder where your app is saved. People seem to think that's the entire app in one file. That's not the case. The project file, the blue file, is a reference to all of these files that make up the app. So this will actually become more populated over time with extra files of code for different views and data models and goodness knows what. We're given by default the content view, which for all intents and purposes of what we're going to do at this early stage, let's call it the home page. So above that is TTM app. Now, whatever you call your project, that'll go at the front and an app will be behind it. Xcode has made that for us. This page here is what runs when the app actually runs either in the preview or in the full simulator or on a device. And this app is going to do one thing, open the content view, and away it goes. Okay, so I know it probably does a lot more than that. People who are very wise in Swift programming will tell me that does about 1 billion different things, but we're looking at a very low-level high school student where we're starting off not knowing a single thing about code or Xcode. So keep it simple and just go, this is what runs when the app runs. The assets is a place where we store images. We can store colors here, believe it or not. Our app icon is there by default. We won't be using this for quite a while. So our next section is the place where all the code gets written. And you'll find that it goes in tabs across the top of the page here. We've even got a tab for assets. I'll close that one for now. And all our code written here, that will then be displayed on our live preview, which is this little window on the side. Now that live preview only exists because of this code. So if I just comment that out, that's no longer read as code anymore, it's a comment. My preview's disappeared. That's because there is no preview to show because, well, I've commented it out. Let me bring that back. It's loading up and we have our hello world again. So realistically, what I would suggest for early stages, pull that all the way down here because we don't care about it. We won't touch it, we won't change it. And if Xcode says that we should put a bracket below here, which is often what Xcode does when there's an issue with the brackets, you just go, well, I don't want it there. I'd like it up here with the actual code. Now, personally, I like having my brackets under each other. And that's because I can see where things start and the yellow lights up, that's where it ends. I can then talk almost in just common English and read the code like a book. Now let me bring down these brackets first. You see there's start and end. There's V-stack, start and end. And to read this like a book, I just go word at a time, one word at a time. Most people look at code and see about 1,000 words and there's words missing that doesn't make it a full sentence, or the words are slightly different, or there's more full stops and commas. Yeah, I can understand. It may look confusing, but for a person who can't read, 1,000 words on a page in a book looks confusing. And what we do is we teach someone to read it one word at a time. So let's start at the top. Import Swift UI. I am importing all the code that's involved with SwiftUI so I can use it inside of here. If I just comment that out, you'll see all these errors. What's a view? I have no idea, says the code. And that's because it doesn't know any SwiftUI. Now it does, and those errors go away. So I read this one line at a time. The struct content view. Now, when you're going early, I know struct might mean something else to other people, but let's call it a structure for the time being to give us an idea that this is a structure that's going to be displayed on the screen. So this structure is going to be called content view, and it is going to be a view. That's where it starts, that's where it ends. Next, the variable is called body, and it's going to be some sort of view. That's where it starts, that's where it ends. Inside of that, I have a V stack. V stands for vertical. Stack, I hope, is obvious. We're going to vertically stack everything that's inside the squiggly brackets. So you can almost consider it like a box. I'm going to vertically stack this image and this text inside my box. You can see on the right hand side here I've got the globe and hello world. This code is pretty simple. Image, it puts an image on the screen. It's got a system name because it's a system image called globe. Now I'm going to change it to be a little bit more cool and go figure.skating. The image scale is large and the foreground color, so the color of it is the accent color. Now that's a little confusing early on, so I'm just going to change that to font large title because our system images can be modified by the font. And I'm going to add the next modifier, foreground color, blue, which is our accent color by default anyway. So the accent color was actually more just the default color of the buttons inside of the device. So if the user changes their highlighted color for files or anything like that, or buttons, it'll be that color consistent with the rest of the Mac or iPhone or wherever it may be. Text hello world, again, pretty obvious. I'm going to put the text on the screen and that text will be hello world. Now that text is not read as code, it's read as just text to put on the screen. We call them strings. So I can put anything in there, including an emoji. Let's just jump up here and go edit emojis and symbols. I'm going to shove in, or well, why not? There it goes. Because that is considered text, it gets put on the screen. I wonder if I do that. No, it doesn't convert it directly. I thought it might convert it directly, but it doesn't. You can shove an emoji in there though, no issues whatsoever. You'll display it on the screen appropriately. Below that, I've got padding, and that puts space around my V stack. We'll get onto padding later on when we start doing a few activity rows. So as you would have guessed by now, this here is the live preview of our code. Now you can run it in the full simulator if you're having issues here, because it's not fully reliable. There might be some errors and you don't know why things aren't running, because there's no massive red over here, but there's a red over there. In which case, if you're not sure, just hit play and that'll run the full simulator. Chances are, if it's red here though, and you hit play, once it opens, it will crash, but at least it'll point you in the right direction. The last thing is something that I've actually already hidden. This is the inspectors. Now this can be an inspector of this file and what it belongs to and things like this. None of this we care about at this early stage of our coding. Alrighty, so on to our first view. And as I said, the app that we're building is a teacher time manager. And my goal is to have a countdown in some sort of visual representation and a list of activities that the teacher will do in class and just skip through or play at the same time or goodness knows what. But for now, all I care about is making the screen as a prototype so that people can get a feel for what it looks like and how it will work. So what's it going to be made up of? Well, everything's going to be displayed from top to bottom. Therefore, I need a V stack. Now, there are 3 different types of stacks that we worry about. We've got V stack, which you can see above and below, H stack, horizontally stack them beside each other, and Z stack. Let's put a little skateboarder behind hello world. Okay, and this order is important. So here, the image gets put down first, then text goes over top. If I go to my V stack, the skateboard is on top. Let's put a little figure below, and now second, because it's written second. Back and put that in. And horizontal stack, same deal. This is written first, so it appears first, and we go left to right. Okay, next. We're going to throw in 2 circles on the screen. One there will be like a little background circle. That'll give a feel for the user of how much longer to go. Okay, so that'll be representing the full completed activity. Then on top of that, we're going to throw a progress circle. So this one is not completed, and our goal is that it goes around here and finishes at the top based on the time remaining in the activity. Now that functionality we're going to do much later on. For now, we're just going to display it as a stock standard set, 66% or whatever it may be. Alrighty, so let's build our view. Oh no, we have a little bit more. Next is on top of that, well, there's our Z stack as we discussed. On top of that, I'd like to put the text 20 in the play button. Now we'll code this later on, so the play button turns to pause and pause turns to play, depending on the status of the timer. But for now, I'm just going to display play on the screen. Now I want these guys to be above and below each other, not like our little skateboarder over here. I don't want him to be behind, so I don't want the play button behind there. So for that to work, I need to put a V stack inside my Z stack. So you can see the pink there for the Z stack. Inside it will be our 2 circles. And then we're going to have our V stack, which is going to contain our text and image. A little bit like this. There's my V stack. Okay. So next, we're going to have our activity row. It's going to go horizontally across the screen, so I'm going to have a H stack. Then we're going to have the image with the text of how long this activity is going to go for. Now obviously this is not beside each other, they're above each other, so I need to throw in a V stack. Finally, we're going to put the activity name with a nice little background color, which is going to match the color of our circle. Now this is going to be done not with a Z stack. Now we can do code in different ways and you get the exact same results, and no one will really care at the end of the day. Your user won't know the difference unless your app is running really slow, but the user in most cases won't know the difference. So we're going to do it a very simple background property. All right, so let's get started. It's working on our Z stack and V stack and our circles. Now, I don't like working with all my code in one screen. It's not manageable, so if there's an error, I have to hunt through thousands of lines of code, and I don't want to do that. So that's not manageable. And I can't reuse it. I don't like copy and paste. Okay, we're aiming to be lazy here. We want to call upon that countdown circle as many times we want by just saying countdown circle. So we're going to make a new file, which is going to be therefore a new struct, exactly the same as this, except it's going to be called countdown. File, new file. If you're very eager, you can do Command N on your keyboard. And I'm going to choose a template for my new file. I want to use all the template involved with the SwiftUI view. I don't want to type this out in my Swift file. I want to give me this code. So this Swift file and this Swift file are actually identical, but this has the template for all the code involving our view. Next, going to go to countdown as the name. Note here that the name starts with a capital bit like content view here. No spaces, and then a capital D to indicate the second word. Again, a bit like content view. Capital C, capital V. It indicates two words, but there's no space. We don't put spaces in the names of words when we code, unless you're one of those funny people who do snake case. We like our camel case. Create. And there's our new view. We're going to get a hello world over here any moment. But while we wait for that, I'm going to bring down my squigglies by hitting enter in front of my squiggly brackets. Done. Now I don't want hello world there. I'm going to follow my plan. And my plan says start with a Z stack. Now a Z stack is a bit like a box. I'm going to stack everything on top of each other. And I need squiggly brackets. Now you can see here I've got an error. A lot of people will see this error and start to freak out. Don't. The only reason why this error is here is because you actually haven't finished coding the Z stack. It's saying I need lots more things with my Z stack to work. So now open a squiggly bracket, hit enter straight away, because that way I don't get that little error down the bottom there, expected squiggly bracket. Because for every bracket you open, you must close it. So I've now got my Z stack, I've got my box. And I'd like to put a circle inside that box. And the code is ridiculously easy. Circle, 2 round brackets. That will put a circle on the screen. Enter. I'm actually going to put a second circle on top just to put a little demonstration here. Go circle, and you'll see that nothing changes. Now that's because the 2 circles are layered on top of each other. Let's go frame width 100, height 100. Still no difference because they're both black. Foreground color, red. And there's my little red circle in the middle. So I do have 2 circles there. They're going to layer on top of each other, as does our Z stack work. However, I need to start modifying them. So you might see around people talk about modifiers. That's where you have this view, which is called an object, and I'm adding a modifier by doing a full stop and adding the modifier stroke first, because this will add a stroke of color. Well, that blue's quite nice, but I might go mint. It seems to be a favorite color of my students at the moment. And you can kind of see out the side here, there's our little mint line behind it. But I'm going to make the line width 50. Now what you'll find is that actually puts a line around our circle, but you'll find there's actually more line inside of here. So if I just comment this one out, you see it's actually quite thick. What it's doing is putting 25 pixels of line around the outside of the circle and 25 more on the inside. Now we'll fix that issue in later on towards the end of this section. But for now, let's just leave it nice and big. Now I'd like this to be a little bit lighter, so the darker mint line goes on top and you can visually see that. So I'm going to add a modifier to a property inside my modifier. So I'm going to add opacity in here, and that'll make my mint that little bit lighter. Next, let's do a very fancy copy and paste, because I want that exact same code twice. But I don't want the opacity this time. I want it to sit on top. You can see that's got nice and dark, so it looks like I've got 2 there for sure, I'd say. To check that though, I'm going to add one more property, dot trim. Now you'll see that we're getting a helper. If you want to use a helper, a bit like me, I don't want to type that. I'm just going to hold Option on my keyboard and hit Enter. And now I can type in the numbers I want. 0 to 0.5 is a good demo. And you can see it started here, and we're going to round to 0.5, halfway around the circle. Let's go 0.75, and obviously 0.25. But we don't want perfection, we'd like a little bit of variance, so we're going to go 7, 8. So that looks quite good. We do want to start at the top here though, so I might put a dot rotation effect. Now this is a little bit optional. When I choose rotation effect, you can see it's asking me, give me an angle. So it's called angle and it will be an angle. So I'll start typing angle, capital A, angle. There's my helper. It's even saying, hey, there's an angle in degrees. Now, my mathematics isn't that strong to talk about radians. I'm just going to go degrees. And how many degrees do I want to rotate it? I'll try 90. Well, that seems to have moved it forward. Let's keep going 180. A little bit further to 70. There we go. So it's going around that way to fill up. Now it's a bit different to my plan here, but I might just stick with that. I think it looks quite nice going around, a bit like a clock. Right, last step. I need my 20 and play in my V stack, which will be inside my Z stack. So there's the start, there's the end. I'm going to stay inside my Z stack. I'm going to put a V stack, squiggly, enter straight away, close my squiggly, text, 20, image, system, name, play.fill. Now it's not quite how I'd like it to look, and I want to show you a couple of ways of doing the modifiers for text. One is to simply type it onto the object. So I've gone font.large title, give another modifier to that large title and make it bold. I can copy, I can paste. That will work just fine. No one's going to argue with you. You've done a great job. It won't really affect performance, but if we want to be really good coders, we write as little code as we can. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to add it to my VStack. That will apply the .font, .large title, .bold to both objects inside this VStack. I'm going to do the exact same thing to my foreground color and make it mint. And now I have my foreground color mint applied to both the text and the image. Now I said you would get to this at the end. We really like this to sit right on the edge, because at the moment that's the edge of the screen, which is the edge of the frame of the circle. So you can imagine there's a box around here. Well, I'd like to move that in, so I'm going to sneak in a little bit of padding of 25, which is half of my 50. So as I said before, the circle stroke has 25 out, 25 in, making up my 50 line width. So padding at 25 will throw that just inside the edge of my frame, so it looks like a perfectly sized circle. So when I call it in my content view later on, you can easily just manipulate and change it, knowing that it's going to fit to those dimensions exactly. All right, one down. Next, we need to add in our activity row. So I'm going to leave this here. I've got, what's that, about 20 odd lines of code. I don't want to add to that. I'm going to make a new row on its own with a new file, Swift UI view, and I'll call it activity row, no space, capital R, capital A, and create that. And I get a fresh new view with a fresh new body, and I have my hello world back again. Squigglies are coming down by putting my cursor in front of the squiggly and hitting enter. Don't write another one, as some students do. They tend to leave a squiggly up here and then draw another one down there, and all of a sudden things don't line up and there's too many, not enough, and look at it all turn red. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so there's my hello world. Let's get my plan up. So on the right hand side, I'll go to my next stage of my plan, which is my row. And what do I need first? Well, everything's going in a Z and a H stack, it appears. H stack, enter, open squiggly, close squiggly. Ready to go. What's next? We'd like a image and a time. So that's going to go in, yep, a V stack. Squiggly, squiggly open, squiggly closed. I'm going to image system name figure.skating because I'm a cool kid who skates. Text 2000. Brilliant. And I'd like that little guy to be bigger. Now I can go nice title, just like I did before. That makes both of them big. I don't want that. So this time, I'm just going to throw it on the image. And that works nicely. Next, what do we have? We have next to it activity name. Great. That's just text with some speech marks saying that this text view is going to show activity name, activity text, activity online. Copy and paste. Great. Bold as well. Oh, even better. Now, if we want to be pedantic, if you want to go, I want the least amount of lines possible, I cut that out, cut this out, paste it onto there, and .font.body. Now, one could argue exactly the same number of lines of code, but just really shows that you can do this in multiple different ways and end up with the same result. Let's go, and let's leave it like that. Won't harm anything. It's different to what I did in class. All right, that was pretty good, but I have a bit of space there. Now, if you were to Google this, you'd probably find it pretty quick. I want to put some spacing beside or between my views. So the spacing on our stack, you can do this on a V stack as well. The spacing will put the space between the V stack and the text. And we can make that bigger if we like. Now that differs to padding because padding will put space on both sides unless we do some fancy code, which I don't care about right now. All right, job done there. It looks like it's all mint. Well, it will be mint because that's my theme at the moment. So I'm going to do a foreground color on the entire stack. Make it all mint. Brilliant. Finally, what have I got? Yep, there's our background. So I want a background to the H stack, filling in that color. Background. Color.mint. Oh, that's a problem. Now the reason why we got this is because the foreground color is mint, the background's mint. Clearly, they are cancelling each other out. You're getting no push through of the foreground color of the mint. So I think it's opaque, 0.2. So I really like the idea of having just that stock standard theme color rather than trying to put 20 different colors on the screen and making a bit of a mess. Now it would be nice if it had that rounded look, so I'm going to add another modifier, corner radius, 20, 10, that's it. Now you can do this in a different way, nothing stopping you. We can go rounded rectangle, which has a corner radius of 10 and a foreground color of .mid.opacity 0.5, 0.2, I think I had it. There we go. Same result. No one loses, no one is right, no one is wrong, but I just prefer in this case, because it fits on one line, I'm going to choose color.mint as my background. Rightio, so evaluating this, because we're always evaluating our work afterwards, that looks a bit tight. So maybe before I put my background on, let's add some padding around the outside. There we go. Padding there, padding there, padding there. There's padding around the outside, around the outside. Okay, activity row done. Countdown circle. Done. Let's go to our content view. Let's bring these two views together. So let's stick with our padding. That looks okay for now. I'm sure we're going to use that later. We generally do. I'm just going to remove that code and I'd like to put in my countdown. Thank you, helper. I'll take the countdown with 2 round brackets. Great. We have our countdown circle ready to go, sitting in the middle. Let's add below that an activity row. Even better. Now if you want a second one, fancy copy and paste, fancy copy and paste. And that's starting to look like an app. Now, I quite like being lazy. That's my personal preference. And I also know that in the future, I'm not going to go copy paste of activity rows. They're going to be rows that the teacher types into the app and they're making the activities for the day and they're going to be displayed automatically. So to kind of simulate that in a way, I'm going to do a for each of the numbers between 1 and 100, because that's lots. Identified by itself, we'll talk about that in future videos. Number in, and I'm putting number in, even though I'm not using number, I'll explain why I'm putting that in a minute. It's more of a teaching thing. Activity row. There we go. So that looks dreadful at the moment, but we'll fix it up shortly. It's going to be, just explain this code, for each number in the range of 1 to 100. So for each number in 1 to 100, create an activity row. So we'll go through number 1 and create a row. Number 2, 3, 4, 5 makes a row. 99, 100 makes a row. So we've repeated the code, put an activity row in 100 times. If we want to make that smaller or bigger, we just add or subtract numbers. I quite like leaving it as 1. Some people start at 0. That's my preference, because I think you guys as students will understand that a little clearer, 1 to 100. Alrighty, so what's happened to our view? Well, what's happened is it sits in the middle in our VStack. It puts everything above it and everything below it, and right at the top, well above our screen, will be our countdown. So instead of having that, let's put in a scroll view, which will be a vertical scroll view, a couple of squigglies like a VStack or a ZStack. We're saying in this scroll view, could you scroll an activity row? 100 of them, in fact. So if I put up here, text, hello, we are almost done. You can see that goes to the top, and when I scroll, that disappears. So that's working quite nicely, looking like and acting like an actual iOS, iPhone, iPad, Mac, whatever you're using, app. Get rid of that, and that's looking quite nice now. But again, if I was to evaluate it, I'm not happy that that doesn't line up perfectly there. So that's an alignment issue in our design principles, but I'll take it on the chin for now because this is just a practice app for us to learn how to code. In our next lesson, we'll be putting together the data model so that activity name is replaced with the actual lesson activities that the teacher is going to input. Thanks for watching. I hope you find this really easy. Let me know if there are any issues and we'll clean up your code in our next